Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monroe City Council meeting. This is a regular study session meeting for Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. The time right now is 7 p.m. I'm going to ask that our clerk Wyckoff please call the roll.
Just going to double check and make sure Councilmember Gamble hasn't signed on real quick first.
Yet. I'll take a look. No, not yet.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members present and establishing a quorum are Council members Fulcher, Beaumont, Walker, Fisher, and Scarborough. Please, for the record, Councilmember Walker is attending virtually.
Thank you, and we'll announce Councilmember Gamble when he enters chambers. And Councilmember Hanford, you're wearing a hat today, so Councilmember Fisher, your name tags are reversed. Councilmember Hanford said he was not going to be here this evening, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so unless there is objection, we'll consider his absence as excused. All right. Councilmember Beaumont, please lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Okay, so this is a limited public forum for people to speak to the council during this council meeting. Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to address the council this evening? Okay, I'll need to read something and then I'll have, you can come on forward and you can hang out while I'm reading this. Yeah.
I didn't really prepare anything.
It's okay. So just hang out for a second. The attorneys make me read this. Okay. All right, this is a limited public forum for people to speak to the council during this council meeting. Topics are limited to items on tonight's agenda, meeting, and to topics specific to city laws, budgets, and operations under the council's authority. Comments that are outside this limited scope will not be allowed. Comments that do not follow the council's rules of procedure will not be allowed. Pursuant to council rules of procedure as amended by the council action on December 12, 2023, spoken comment is limited to in-person comment only for all city public meetings, including city council and city boards and commissions. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Spoken comments that are not within the scope of this time limit of this limited public forum can be sent to the council in writing. Information on where to send written comments is on tonight's agenda and on the screen. We now begin public comment. So I'm just going to ask you please state your name and your association with the city, and then we'll start the 3-minute timer.
Okay. Hi, I'm
And
Sherry.
you can pull the microphone down.
Oh.
And I would encourage you to
Because
do
I'm
that.
short. Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sherry Novak. I've lived in the city since the 80s. I work in town. I've owned my house since 91. I'm a downtowner, so in Old Town. I'm really interested in the new ADU, and I just wanted to see how that was progressing and, to see if it's going to be something that will work in our historic part of town, since I know my house is really old and it doesn't meet current codes. So I was just gonna listen to you guys and see what was coming up the pipe and if it was anything that could, of course, benefit me and my area of town.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else who'd like to speak to the council this evening? All right. Okay. You got here just in time. So I'm going to forego reading all this.
I got you.
You got 3 minutes. If you say something that is out of the bounds of certain things, I'll stop you and
Swear
then
words.
maybe no.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, those included, but I'll let you know. But so the ask here is that you just state your name and your association with the city, and then we'll hit 3 minutes and you'll go.
All right. My name is Natalie Morgan. I'm a citizen here of Monroe. I've lived here for a couple years now, and my public comment has to do with marijuana dispensaries here in Monroe. I find it a little disappointing, to be really honest, that it's not already legal here. There's no, economic reason behind it. There's certainly no moral argument against it. If we're, looking at the facts of the situation, there's no scientific study that would ever, back up, keeping marijuana dispensaries out of cities like this, especially in a state where here in Washington, us Washingtonians voted to legalize that, and what I saw as a huge move to be leaders here in the United States on progressive policies, especially, things that, well, we all know. I'm sure I don't have to give you guys a history lesson about the racist history of the war on drugs, started by Richard Nixon, who specifically targeted Black communities so they could arrest their leaders with drug charges. That's just a fact. And we know how detrimental that has been to communities of color here in the United States, and how incredibly ineffective it has been. And, I'm from Eastern Washington, a very conservative, small town, and I found it, again, like pretty disappointing to come over here into a city that, what I think of as trying to be like progressive and not be seen as kind of like a podunk out in the sticks, not forward-thinking community. I would definitely want to be a part of like leading, as far as, some of these policies go. I have had a dream of having a dispensary here with my sister, and I just am really sad that I know that there's been a vote on it before that has not passed, and I just would be really, really curious to know why, the reasons. Our friends over in Snohomish, they've got a couple dispensaries that they are more than glad to, of course, take the tax revenue from. We know that there are a lot of people that benefit from cannabis use. There has been studies on it. There are veterans with PTSD. I would never want to stop from using their medication of choice. And as far as public safety goes, there are no links to marijuana use. There are certainly links, alcohol use, a huge, huge problem. And I think we all know that that's pretty readily available around these parts. And, there's a gun store on like Main Street here. And I think we all know, the problem with gun violence here in the United States. So it's certainly not, a matter of like public safety. So I just wanted to say I am so incredibly for people to have the freedom to open the business that they want, especially since it's, hey, legal here in Washington, again, as a leader. And I want to just put forth that, you have a lot of support from people my age here in the community and the community you're trying to build for marijuana dispensary here inside the city limits of Monroe. So thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.
Perfect time.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak this evening? Again, if you could state your name and association with the city, and then we'll start the timer.
My name is Kelsey Dawkins, and I live here in Monroe, and I'm also on the Planning Commission, but I'm coming here as a citizen. And I just wanted to share some stats about how much revenue the Cushry in Snohomish got just in January. They brought in $298,000. Last year, it was over $3 million in revenue for the year. And I think that our sales tax is 9.4%, right? That would be about over $280,000 going to the city if we were to have that in city limits. So we're really missing out on an opportunity to help our community with other things, with that money. So I just wanted to bring that to light, and that is from top shelf data. I'd be happy to share that with the council. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Great, and anybody else interested in speaking again? All right, thank you very much. Public comment is now closed. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that item would be announcements and presentations. We have a presentation this evening from Luke Esser regarding the 2024 legislative recap.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity. Luke Esser, you're a contract state lobbyist. Jim Hedrick, my colleague, would have liked to have been here. He's in Washington, D.C., the other Washington, working the Hill for another client right now, but I'm happy to deliver a little post-mortem, little synopsis of what occurred and didn't occur during the 2024 session of the legislature, and I'll use the materials that were presented to the council for this week as a rough outline of my remarks. I did want to start with kind of a big picture overview. This was a short session of the legislature, a 60-day session, as they always hold in even-numbered years, supplemental budgets, transportation, capital, and operating. The one difference this year is that what really cast a shadow over the entirety of the session were the 6 initiatives to the legislature that received enough signatures to be presented to the legislature in December of this year. The legislature ultimately adopted 3 of those, as I'm sure you're aware. The 3 that were adopted were Initiative 2081, adopting a Parents' Bill of Rights, Initiative 2111, banning state and local income taxes, and Initiative 2113, a reasonable suspicion standard for police vehicular pursuits. The 3 initiatives the legislature decided to pass along to the voters this upcoming November were Initiative 2109, repealing the capital gains tax, Initiative 2117, repealing the Carbon Commitment Act, and Initiative 2124, opting out of the Washington Cares long-term care program. Certainly, those didn't affect every piece of legislation in the legislature this year, but it affected many of the deliberations and had an impact in what the legislature decided to do on transportation, on the environment, and on several other issue areas this year. That being said, let's move now to some of the issues that were on the council's adopted priorities heading into the session. There was first of all, a request for an additional $1 million from the state operating budget to fund construction of the therapeutic court. We did not receive any additional funding. It was a supplemental budget, and they were a little more constrained than they usually are for several different reasons. We obviously remain grateful for the $1.1 million that our local delegation helped us to obtain last year for that project, and I think we have positioned ourselves well to ask for additional resources in future years, though we did not receive any additional funding on that project this particular year. Another priority was ensuring that the SR 522 widening project maintained the current amount of funding which it had previously received, and try to retain it on a current timeline moving forward. And you may recall that what has been funded by the legislature so far is money for the design, engineering, and right-of-way acquisition for that project, and we were successful in maintaining all of the funding for that. The schedule did move backward by 1 biennium from the end of 2027 to the end of 2029. To put that in context, a big fight that we had last year was the governor had proposed in 2023 that the project actually slipped to the year 2035. And after considerable effort by our elected officials and our local delegation, we were able to get us back to the original schedule and funding amount. And as a reminder, it's wonderful that we have this funding. The real big chunk, the real heavy lift is going to come the next time the state has a new revenue transportation package. We are hoping to obtain the construction funding for that, which is, well, to put it bluntly, real money. The estimate is in the $270 million range to construct that project, which includes 2 new interchanges, a dozen new culverts. Very important project, obviously, but not an inexpensive one. But bottom line, we have maintained the funding and the rough schedule for the first phase of that project. Other priorities that the city adopted, which were in line with adopted priorities of the Association of Washington Cities, helping to recruit and retain police officers for public safety. And there were some incremental small steps in that direction this year. Traditionally, the state has funded 75% of the costs of the basic law enforcement academy. They finally decided to fund 100% of it this year, and that's not a huge amount of money, but it's a step in the right direction. There was also a new regional training academy funded for Snohomish County in this current session of the legislature, which means that new recruits won't have to travel as far in the future, won't have to go to Burien for their training. It's interesting that Skagit County had that money originally, but couldn't follow through on implementing it. So it moved a little bit closer to Snohomish County now with this change in the current budget. There was also legislation adopted that will allow law enforcement officers to work part-time and remain in the pension system, and also legislation that will allow the DACA recipients to serve as law enforcement officers. Some helpful legislation that did not pass. There was some legislation out there that would have provided more options to cities for an additional 0.1% sales tax to be used for law enforcement officer recruitment and retention. There was actually one proposal that the state would subsidize that neither of those proposals went anywhere. So like, as I said, some incremental steps towards helping to recruit and retain police officers, but no giant moving forward this particular session. In terms of the property tax cap, the 1% property tax cap that exists for all local governments outside of voter approved increases, there was legislation to offer to increase that to 3% or the amount of inflation that did not make it out of the Senate this year, proved very controversial. And the sponsor of that legislation have urged local elected officials and local cities and counties around the state to make the case more that increase is needed. So that was the response of the Senate Ways and Means Committee on that legislation. Another priority was supporting legislation that would give cities access to Climate Commitment Act cap and trade revenues. And there were a couple of significant pots of money, grant programs adopted this year on the Climate Commitment Act, though all of them were made contingent on what happens at the ballot this November with the aforementioned initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. So there's potentially some funding there in grant programs. There's no dedicated funding that's committed to cities in the same way that with the gasoline tax, there's an increment that is always guaranteed to cities through the TIB, the Transportation Improvement Board. So we haven't been successful in obtaining that from the CCA yet, though if it exists, we'll continue to work towards that end. Behavioral health is another big issue all over the state of Washington, and there were several new appropriations for state facilities, and not surprisingly, the state took care of their own needs first, and they do have huge needs at Western State Hospital, Eastern State Hospital, and other state facilities. There were some smaller funding increases for regional and local programs. There was not the additional funding requested for mobile mental health in the Sky Valley area. There was some minor policy changes that are helpful for the provision of some behavioral health services. There was a bill passed that provided some limited liability protection for behavioral health crisis co-responders, a level of protection that already exists for the dispatchers. So the thought was, why not let the people who actually go out and do the work have that same level of liability protection? There was legislation that authorized 23-hour crisis relief centers for youth in the same way that previously the legislature had authorized those same types of facilities for adults. One negative was that as mentioned in some of the materials, the legislature did not pass the Co-Responder Outreach Alliance's proposed legislation to define co-response and provide funding for standard statewide certification and co-responder training. So that was left undone by the legislature this year. Affordable housing, obviously another huge issue around the entire state, and there were some significant new appropriations, including $117 million in additional funding for the Housing Trust Fund. One issue I wanted to mention here is a recent trend that looks like it will continue in the state legislature, kind of setting, at least in certain areas, development regulations in Olympia that apply on a statewide basis. And we saw that last year in the 2023 session with what was called the Missing Middle or Mandatory Multiplexes bill, which didn't apply at Monroe because it had a population threshold of 25,000 or above, but it was a bill that required cities that met those thresholds to allow at least 4plexes on every residential lot in the city. And there was also an accessory dwelling unit bill that was adopted that required every residential lot to allow 2 accessory dwelling units. And we saw more of that sort of direction from Olympia this year in terms of proposed legislation. This year, these bills didn't pass, but bills that were offered and got out of the House included a bill on requirements for lot splitting, a bill requiring neighborhood cafes in every residential zone in cities, and a bill that would dramatically increase zoning required in transit-oriented development situations, areas where there are transit stations, bus rapid transit stops, and rail stops. So we're continuing to see a feeling in Olympia among some that cities are not doing enough to provide the affordable housing we need. So Olympia needs to provide some more minimums or some development requirements with cities to help ease that. What many of us try to offer on the other side of that is the flip side of the argument of local control, that I represent 7 cities, and there aren't any of them that don't want any new development. but usually they have spent a lot of time and effort designing where in the city that development is most appropriate and where it isn't. And drawing that line is not easy. But nonetheless, there's a significant movement in Olympia to provide more of these sorts of development regulations that require statewide. Wanted to make sure that the council was aware of that. I'll finish up by talking a little bit about the US 2 capacity improvements. I know we were supportive of what Sultan was trying to accomplish, kind of similarly to our situation with SR 522 widening project. They probably won't get the money they need until the next major new revenue transportation budget for the state that'll come about. And the important thing for both that project and for 522 is to be ready, because these new revenue transportation budgets usually come out every 6 to 8 years or so. So you don't want to be in a position to just miss it, to be not quite ready with your ask. I think we're very much ready with the 522 widening project, but nonetheless, we will need to have one of those major new state funding programs, to get that $270 million. And so I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions or comments and not continue unendingly with my filibuster. So thanks again for the opportunity to provide a breakdown, a synopsis of what went on in Olympia this year at a very high level, and happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions or comments? Okay, we're going to also let the record show that Jason Gamble joined at, I think it was it 7:03. Good evening, Jason. Okay, so Luke, I'm just going to say that the last 2 years, last 2 sessions, I've really appreciated what you and Jim have been doing. You've been, in my opinion, doing a really good job of keeping us informed. I appreciate the weekly meetings with staff. I appreciate that what we get is more customized for what we need here in Monroe. And so, yeah, you're a consultant for us, but I'm, from my heart, I'm just thanking you. I really appreciate that. I've worked with a lot of different legislative consultants in the past. Sometimes I feel like I'm just getting what AWC is putting out there or some other organization. Sometimes I feel like I'm just getting some sort of printout off of LobbyGov. I feel like we're getting a more customized approach for our needs here, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Very kind, Jim, and I appreciate that, and we appreciate the partnership and the fact that during this short session, both you and most of the council made time to come all the way down to Olympia to bolster our efforts to lobby the local delegation and other legislators as well. So thank you. It's a great team effort, and that's what I think is going to allow us to be successful in the long run.
Thank you, Luke. All right. So we're going to go ahead and go on to the next one, and thank you for coming and presenting this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Next item on the agenda then this evening is councilmember reports, and we'll go ahead and we'll start online with Councilmember Gamble.
No report.
Thank you. Then we'll go to Councilmember Walker.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Then we'll go down to the end to Councilmember Fisher. Okay, Councilmember Beaumont.
Thank you. A couple weeks ago, I think now, I met with Patrick Doherty, our new consultant, and Deborah Knight, and Director Bailey, and Jeff McCord from Nickel Brothers, just to sort of meet with him, talk a little bit about downtown revitalization, historic preservation, gave him a little rundown on the Monroe Historical Society, and that we can be a source for him as he starts working on some of those tasks. And it was a really great meeting. I really enjoyed city staff being there. And it was really great to get to know him a little bit better. I'm really excited about some of the things that he has in store. So that was really time well spent, and I appreciated the support of staff. Also wanted to thank you, Mayor, and city staff for adding a recycling information piece to the mayor's report and the Facebook page. That's something that came up at P3 committee when we were meeting with some folks from Republic Services, is that I think in the community there's sometimes some confusion about what's recyclable, and it's perfect timing with Earth Day coming up on the 22nd, and I just really appreciated that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulcher.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Scarborough. Almost more the Councilmember Davis there, sorry. It was the nothing will report. I just, all right, well, at least we got Kyle switched, so I'm not calling him Kevin this evening. Okay, we're going to now go to city administrator report, extended agenda, Administrator Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Looking at the extended agenda, we are canceling the P3 committee meeting for Tuesday, the 23rd. We are going to instead, though, have a Monroe Transportation Benefit District meeting that evening. So it will have that regular 6 p.m. start time, and we'll be talking about the TBD, and our district finance director will be providing the district board with the annual report. So that's the item on the agenda for that evening, in addition to approval of meeting minutes from the prior meeting. Looking forward then to the council's regular business meeting. We will have a presentation from Kate Turtlelow on the Snohomish County Comprehensive Plan. So just as the city is doing its own comprehensive plan update, the county is also working on theirs. And it'll be an opportunity then to share with the council where the county is at. Looking then to the consent agenda, we'll have that evening the regular accounts payable and meeting minutes. We do have an interlocal agreement with Snohomish County for Affordable Housing and Behavioral Health Fund, an amendment to the Blueberry Playground Equipment Contract, the Janssen Washington statewide opioid settlement agreement, a contract authorizing the mayor to sign with the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, an interlocal agreement facilitating reimbursement for police academy instructor training costs, an award bid and authorization for the mayor to sign a contract with DNG Backhoe for the Wagner Waterline Replacement Project, and then authorizing the purchase of the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So yes, I know a lot of people are excited about the beacons.
I thought we were going to go with the rhombuses, not the rectangular.
I'm just glad I made it through that without making a
You
mistake.
did. You did a great job.
Thank you. Under new business, then we have renewal of the Community Human Service Advisory Board resolution, and then regular department reports that evening. We do have then, looking forward to even beyond the week 5, we'll be having our council retreat workshop to talk about the budget, strategic plan, and priorities.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the extended agenda? Okay, everybody going to be available? Councilmember Fulcher?
Confirming that it's a 5:30 start on the 30th, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Okay, all right. Go ahead on to city administrator report.
Thank you. Waiting for the next slide.
Clap on, clap off.
I have to switch back over to the meeting so I can actually read the slide. We have had a continuing focus at City Hall and at the police department, an emphasis on customer service. One of the things that we recognized with the move and the renovation of the City Hall facility, that we were going to have friction points with that move. We just didn't know where those friction points were necessarily going to be showing up. And what we've discovered is that with the number of people that we've had that have been working for the city for an extended period of time retiring, so we've had a lot of folks that have been with us, 20, 25, 30, even 34 years retire, and that those people that were working for us were themselves community members in many instances. And so what we have found is that with those changes, we really need to have an emphasis on what the city's customer service standards are. And, making sure that as we're bringing new people into the organization, that we're being very, very clear around how we provide customer service to the community. So we've been doing an emphasis around kudos, particularly when we have our staff members who are really providing that level of service that we expect. So we're trying to do an emphasis focus on that. So last week I talked about Sergeant Carswell pulling over an individual, and at the end, that individual thanking Sergeant Carswell for reminding them the kind of the consequences of speeding in the community. This week we have a kudos for Dustin Harvey, who's in our Public Works Department. And one of the things that we've been trying to emphasize with customer service is it's not enough to tell our customers, I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. That really the level of service that we expect is, I can't answer your question, but let me take your name and number, find somebody who can answer that question for you and connect you then with that department. And we had an example of that just in the last week, come up with Dustin in our Public Works Department, where somebody came in, they had a question about parks, park staff wasn't available, and yet Dustin made what we're calling that warm handoff, right? Making sure that the customer knew that somebody would be getting back to them and really working to close that loop. So what we're doing is actually I've been going around to each one of the departments and divisions, and we've been talking about customer service. What is the customer service within the department? And what can we do to ensure that our customer service standards are going to continue to be maintained going forward? So during this transition, when we're not on campus and when we have so many new people joining the organization, that we're making sure that that culture that we've had of customer service in this community really continues on. So kudos to Dustin for really exhibiting that customer service standard that we expect. We do provide during our monthly newsletter, city newsletter, like internal newsletter, making sure that at the top of that, we are kind of recognizing those people that have provided both customer service to our external customers, but also to our internal customers, because there are some departments where the majority of their customers are their own coworkers. So emphasizing that on both sides. So that's the reason why you'll see and continue to see kind of this emphasis during the city administrator's report around good customer service, trying to model what we expect, right? And to recognize people who are kind of achieving or exceeding that standard. The other items that I have on are the things that have been on for the last couple of weeks. Again, just a reminder about the council's strategic plan and budget, and then of course the port boundary expansion, which council members have previously asked when would they have an opportunity potentially to ask more questions from the port about that proposed expansion. And that's all I have, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Beaumont.
On the 16th, is that a drop-in sort of open house, or does it truly start at 4:40 to 6:30 and it's a presentation at the senior center?
That's a great question. I don't know. Let me find out and I'll
Okay,
get back to you.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Modeling.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. Mayor's report. Strategies 360, who currently provides us federal legislative support services. Crystal, who was our contact for some time, left a couple months ago. They just hired a new person. I met with that person along with staff earlier this evening. I will be meeting her on Friday just to take her around to show her some of the projects we're working on for federal funding. We still have a contract with them for the next couple months, and so she just wants to make certain she learns what we're working on and is able to help transfer that knowledge to the next firm that will be the next firm that we will be in contract with. So, let's see, what else do I have? I think that's all that I have to report this evening that I can think about right now. Any questions for me? All righty. Let's go ahead and go on to the next item on the agenda, and that would be item 8.1, Monroe 2044, Draft Housing Chapter with Kate Turtlow. Good evening.
Hello, thank you. All right. As I mentioned, at the last time I saw you, it was for the vision and policy framework. That work is really starting to move quickly. And as a reminder, we will be coming on a regular basis, so you have early and often opportunities to review. So this is the very first draft. It's only been through one review with city staff. It has been presented to the Planning Commission and CHSAB. This document in front of you tonight does not incorporate their comments. I'm still editing them for our consultant team. There is not a presentation slide deck. I'm going to walk you through the document. And first off, I did also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of information in the agenda bill itself. I really wanted to bring your attention to some of the items just under the policy changes that are coming and what isn't a housing element. I believe we did give an overview of that last year, or a couple of years ago, but as a refresher, housing element is required in our comprehensive plan. It outlines policies, objectives, inventory, needs assessment. It's kind of, and preservation is a big piece of it, which you will see the kind of the beginning of that in the document tonight. Also looking at capacity. We started that conversation with you last year when we started looking at the different land scenarios to achieve the population, housing, and employment allocations we've been provided by Snohomish County. And then there's some of the new pieces that came out of the state legislature during the last 3 years. One of them being identify local policies and regulations that resulted in racial disparity impacts, displacement, and exclusion. Identify and implement policies, regulations to address and begin undue racially disparate impact, displacement. You're going to hear this theme over and over. And then the other area that we really need to focus as well is the different income levels in our community. And the term that you'll be hearing, it's called AMI, or the area median income. For Snohomish County, we get lumped in with Seattle, Bellevue, the metropolitan areas. So these numbers might seem a little high to you, but it's the numbers that we work with. I stole some information from the city of Everett. They just produced their document earlier this year. An example is if you are at 100% of the area median income for Snohomish County and you're a one-person family, that annual income is $95,900. For a four-person family, that's $137,000 a year. And the things that we are now being tasked with more than before is making sure that we're providing housing for people who make 30% of the area median income. And so in this example, a four-person family at 30% is only making $41,100 a year. And so it's going to be a challenge. We're going to have to look at policies and new strategies to help us achieve our numbers. So moving on, our plan not only has to be consistent with the Growth Management Act, but it also needs to be consistent with the multi-county planning policies, which is Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050, as well as the Snohomish County countywide planning policies. I see you have a question.
Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead.
Can you go back to your 30%
Yeah.
of the 131,000? You're saying that the average income in Snohomish County is
So
131,000 for a four-person household?
the area median income for Snohomish County, but I want to preface that we are lumped in with Bellevue and Seattle. This is the metropolitan area. For a four-person family is $137,000 a
Okay, I
year.
understood that. So 30% of that, you would put at 41 something. So what are we supposed to be trying to do with the $41,000 income families?
We need to figure out how to provide housing for them. So the other piece of their information they provided, so if you're looking at trying to provide housing for somebody who's at 30%, for a two-bedroom.
$1,200 for a rental?
Right. For this category, it's looking actually at 30%. If you're looking at a studio, $719. If you're looking at a two-bedroom unit, it's $924 a month. And I know Chris Collier has been before you before and really explained the challenges, even for somebody like a nurse. They make pretty good salaries, but they cannot afford housing in Monroe. And so trying to figure out how we're going to have enough housing for the lower income is going to be the challenge.
So your task is to find out how to do the lower income housing in Monroe.
It's part of it, yeah. And it's also the council, because we're going to be looking at goals and policies, and that will work into programs like Rachel, what is Rachel's last name? Adams. It's some of the work that she does as well. So it's going to take a team effort, and it's the thing that keeps on coming up in all the training I've had in the last 2 years is it's not a city of Monroe issue. It is we need assistance from the state and the federal government also to help fund these types of programs for housing. Yeah.
And just to clarify, can you explain a little bit more what you mean by provide? When we say provide the housing, that's
Yes,
market
sorry.
rate? Yeah.
We're not building it. We need to make sure that our regulations are in place and we have programs to assist the development of housing units.
And part of that is making certain that we have regulations in place that don't preclude that kind of development,
That is correct.
that don't keep it from happening. So historically, the planning profession, one of the things that that it has done is to create zoning for only detached residential housing. They've also done things like require minimum house size and things like that, which then drives up the price of housing. So that's part of the regulations that that used to be employed to create just basically neighborhoods that are detached housing with large houses, which then affects housing affordability, because instead of building smaller houses that in the market would be lower cost for somebody to get into, you've mainly got larger homes. Does that make sense? So that's what we mean by provide. It's not just grant funded, although that's part of it in some cases, but it's also making certain that the zoning is there to that doesn't preclude it from happening.
So is that when we look at an apartment complex build, we require X number of units to be in this category?
That could be a part of the solution, but I think a bigger challenge, especially for Monroe, who is used to having like 40% of our land is dedicated right now to detached housing, is looking at more creative ways of creating housing. So duplexes, triplexes, apartments, which will change this community. It's not just making sure you've got affordable apartments, but also different types of housing throughout the community.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's gonna be quite a challenge to build a 900 square foot house that can be sold to somebody in this 40% category, or 30% category. Things like that. I mean,
So
I'm
that's
not talking about a fourplex, a duplex, but a single family housing dwelling that somebody in that category can afford. I don't see it.
So that's part of what the housing policies are that she's going to be talking about tonight. So, okay. All right, any other questions at this time? Go ahead, Councilmember Fulcher.
I had it first. This is where the ADU thing would come in helpful.
Correct.
It would,
There we go.
and I'm not going to touch on that tonight, but Amy Bright, our planner, is actually already working on updating our development code to comply with the new state requirements for accessory dwelling units. It's technically not required until June of 2025, but we're hoping there's enough capacity to get it through the adoption process this year. There's an additional state law that changed, that is the conversion of existing structures into residential, and we're also hoping to see if we can move that along. That will be a little bit more challenging because we don't have something to amend like the accessory dwelling units. Okay, so another part of this challenge is we also need to come up with regulations to discourage displacement. So we have a finite amount of land. A lot of it's already built out. Now we need to figure out how are we going to provide more housing, and on top of that, how do we protect the housing that we have that's affordable? So it's gonna be an exciting and challenging year. So continuing on through some of the information in the background section, just to remind you, Monroe is expected to accommodate an additional 4,600 people approximately by 2044. That's just within the city limits. The total urban growth area, which is the city and unincorporated portions of the UGA, is just over 25,000. Again, that's in the 20-year horizon. Just want to make sure there's not any other notes. And if you've not had a chance to read it and you read it and you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email after tonight's conversation. The next point I wanted to just bring your attention to is this new housing element includes 4 new goals, and those are outlined. Goal 1 It's 6.1 because this is in chapter 6. Encourage a diversity of housing types in Monroe. Goal number 2 is support the development of housing that meets the needs of all people living in Monroe. Goal number 3 is promote housing production in close proximity to employment, services, and transportation options. And goal number 4 is enhance the living conditions of housing and elevate the quality of the social and physical surroundings. So we'll get into that as I walk you through this draft chapter. Any questions?
Go ahead, Councilmember Scarborough.
In reading through your paper, one of the things you've said under community characteristics is that Monroe is an aging community with the highest growth occurring in residents age 50 to 69. And total share of aging residents increased from 14% in 21 in 10 to 21% in 2020. Residents under 20 had the largest decrease in share of the population, declining 4% from 28 to 24%. The average household size, 2.79, et cetera. How, in everything you're trying to do that you're telling us we need to do, how are we taking care of the senior population? I would imagine the majority of whom live in single-family housing and are going to be subject to being bought out so we can build apartments. My concern is, I have a great concern for the senior citizens of this community being pushed into leaving.
So what you're talking about there is displacement.
Say
So
again?
that's called displacement. So let's take your neighborhoods. One of the things that's common in planning is they look at building up areas where you have, just like Kate just read, areas where there's places you can walk to and from, like restaurants and grocery stores, where there's access to transportation. There was a third thing, but when you take all those three things, what areas of town do you think of? Thinking of downtown. And you have some attached housing product or apartments in the downtown, but you also have a lot of detached housing product in the downtown. And so one of the concerns there is that some jurisdictions will go ahead and increase density in those downtown areas, which leads to displacement. That's where you have lower income people, which some of whom could be seniors, where they either feel compelled to sell their home, in which case they're making money, which can be good, so they can use that to go buy a condo or an apartment or something somewhere else that might meet their needs as they get older. Or if they are, say, renting, drives up the price of their rent, which then forces them out when the property owner decides to flip the property, right? So that's displacement. One of the things that planners are tasked with doing today is to try to accommodate concerns over displacement. So what you're bringing up there is important for income purposes, of which seniors are certainly part of that equation. So she'll be going through some of those thoughts, I guess, either tonight and or over the next couple of meetings over displacement. This is one of the reasons why when I've been talking about annexation areas, I've been talking about how those are maybe not so bad areas to identify to be higher density. So not a traditional approach. Usually you put it in the downtown, but then you're displacing people. But if all you've got is sort of, a hobby farm, a couple 2-acre hobby farms, there's not a displacement of somebody living there. You might have a couple horses or something like that, right? So the idea here being that that would be one way, I'm not saying it's the right way, but it'd be one strategy to minimize displacement. That when an area annexes, you annex it at a higher density, and maybe you have attached housing product in lieu of detached housing product. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you an example of one method to try to minimize displacement effects.
Well, you're talking about annexing big parcels of land that you could do this high-density building on. by displacing a farm and one house, 5 acres where you could put multiple housing. I guess that's well and good if the person wants to sell,
Right,
but what if the person lived there all their life and they don't want to sell and they're not real happy with all the growth that's going on around them that's pushing them out?
yeah, we should have more conversation about that maybe another time, because I don't know that people are pushing them out when they opt to sell. So, let's, I'd be happy to have an offline conversation with you so that I can understand that a little bit more. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm just trying to provide an example of what I meant by displacement as we were discussing that.
Yeah, it sounds like we don't want to talk about it. That's what it sounds like. We don't want it in a public forum because we don't want to talk about it because it's a sore subject with me. It's a sore subject because we say, well, they could sell because they could make lots of money. Well, you can make lots of money selling your house, but you can't buy another one for what you get for it. So where do the old people go? I mean, if they want to go into high-rise living where they can go downstairs and go over to the restaurant or here and there, that's fine. But what if they don't want to do that?
Okay, so my intent with my statement was not to stop discussion on this topic, to be clear. Yet it was, I know that Kate has got other things that she's going to go through on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm fine to hear.
Okay. The intent here is to minimize displacement effects as part of the housing policy.
That's good. I agree with it.
Yeah, so I just want to be very clear for the record, and if any council members feel I was trying to shut down conversation on that topic, please let me know. But my intent here is to make certain that Kate has the ability to continue with her presentation. Kate, if we could make certain that his concerns are also addressed either tonight or in the future presentation. Yeah, and again, my intent to have a conversation offline was to understand that perspective more because it's not a perspective that I've heard before. So, thank you.
So I do want to share, this is completely online with your concern. With the conversations I've been having with the Planning Commission, there is a real concern of how do we protect the downtown core, because that has the greatest mix of uses and it's affordable. And so some of the creative ideas that they've asked me to look into is, are there ways that we can actually incentivize a property owner to get some kind of added bonus to protect the existing structure? There's a concern to protect those beautiful buildings along Main Street. Well, how do you do that if you're trying to encourage new development? A thought was, if you preserve the existing structure, maybe we can give you some kind of incentive, which is something I have just started looking into, but that's another tool that we're going to try to evaluate to try to preserve some of that housing in downtown. So you're asking a very good question.
Can I follow up on it, please?
You have the floor, go ahead.
When you talk about maintaining the downtown feel, look, don't want to destroy it, I totally agree with that. Are you talking about taking something like the Doloff Key building and maybe that whole block and destroying it, but rebuilding it farther off the main road a little bit so there's better parking, have the new buildings built in the motif of the Doloff Key building or the barber shop or all of those shops along there, and using that as a revitalization of downtown Monroe? Or does it have to be, and you can help answer this possibly, does it have to be using the existing building? I mean, if you take that block, the building across the street from Doloff Key on that corner went in when Coast to Coast burned down. The other end of that block where the VFW is, that went in when that building burnt down. So is that a thought process in your project work?
No.
Okay.
We're
Should it
not-
be?
I guess that's a
Could it
conversation.
be?
It could be, but that kind of defeats the purpose of protecting, I mean, that gets kind of at the displacement.
Yeah,
That's more of an affordable commercial space, and it also has more affordable housing above it. So I would hate to see that disappear. But that's part of the conversations that we're all going to be having in the next, it'll probably go beyond this comp plan update, honestly.
okay. Go ahead.
Okay. See if there's any other notes I want to highlight. Okay, we've gone through the goals. All right, so I'm just going to quickly walk you through the housing chapter. And again, I'm giving you a homework assignment. If you get the opportunity, I would appreciate your review of this draft chapter. Again, it is the very first draft. It is not fully fleshed out. It does not include a lot of graphics. It does include some tables. And if you can get me your comments by April 24th, I would appreciate it. And if you like editing, I accept all edits. All right, so set up like this is basically the template for all of the chapters. There's a brief introduction of what we'll be covering. Then it includes the relationship to the other regulatory documents that we need to comply with, which I've already mentioned this evening. And then getting into the housing chapter, we get into some of the population characteristics. What's the total population? What's the race and ethnicity? Then it gets into the age conversation that we were talking about earlier. Then moving on, the next section gets into the inventory. When were the houses built? For the most part, Monroe is, I think, kind of unique in the sense that most of the houses are newer, from the 1970s. So you have a relatively new housing stock. Then it also has a breakout of housing type. And this is one unit, which is typically the detached or formerly referred to as single family. And then you've got 2 or more units, and then the manufactured homes. That's on page 6.6. And I apologize, I didn't print this out on the big numbers. And then moving on, it talks about the percentage of owner occupied versus rentals. And then it starts getting into the new information about affordable housing. One of the first indicators is the per capita income versus the median household income. So we're actually going to work with the consultants a little bit to dig in there. I also do want to note that I believe there is a little bit more current data available, so we have asked the consultants to look at that. Monroe went through a small building boom between 2020 and 2023. This data does not capture that. I think that it would be helpful as you're considering policy changes. Moving on, it also talks about housing cost, rental costs, and then getting into where I started the conversation a little bit about the area median income, breaking that out. There's a table in there that we will be filling in on what is currently existing in the community and the different types of housing, which somewhat gets to Councilmember Scarborough's question. I don't think there should be an assumption that everybody is going to own a house. We need to look at other alternatives, and that is a studio apartment to an accessory dwelling unit to detached residence. We have a full variety of opportunity or options for our residents to live in. And then the next section, I'd really, if you just have a little time, I'd like you to start reviewing the goals, policies of are these goals and policies going to help us achieve what we're trying to get at from housing numbers and housing type?
Councilmember Beaumont.
Thank you. On that page, Kate, I'm just wondering if you could tell me the blue edits versus the red edits. Are some of those planning commission versus maybe?
No, those are just Kate and consultant. Well, not just Kate, but it's staff and consultant. We were noticing that there were some hiccups in this, so that this does not include any planning commission or CHSAB edits to date.
Got it. Thank you.
So that is just a really brief overview. This is not the last time you will see this. I expect I will be back at least 2 more times, one with all of the information where we have a holding spot, and that really gets to the new things that we have not really tackled before. And then we will be back again with a more cohesive document as we're preparing the final big comprehensive plan, and that would be anticipated in the summer. I expect I'll be back to you with the edits probably within the next month, month and a half.
Anything further?
That's it.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Councilmember Scarborough, going back to the conversation that we were having, is there, and Kate, if you could hold on a second.
Yep.
So again, I still want to understand more how somebody feels compelled to sell property they own. I don't know that we need to have the conversation here. But to the extent that you've got some information that you can share with Kate, so that we can understand that better, or other concerns around seniors and costs and pressure to sell, I would appreciate having that information shared at least with staff. Do you have that information that you can share with the council this evening?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Are you, more than selling property, is it more of the, you have a home somewhere in Monroe and you would like to age in that home from when you moved in? Yeah, that's what I thought you were getting at. So I think I understand your concern, and I'm not sure the tools that I have, but I'll see what, so it's aging in place is what Councilmember Scarborough is getting at.
Okay.
So let me ask you a follow-up then. So if I'm understanding correctly, if you've got all of your bedrooms on the second floor and you're concerned that you're getting older and that you can't find a product here in Monroe with rooms on the first floor, is that what you're talking about?
No,
Aging
staying
okay.
in your house. Like, for example, my dad had a 3-story home. My mother couldn't walk. They got the Acorn thing to help him get up the stairs.
Yeah.
They converted a bathroom on the main floor so she could shower. So you don't have to move out of your house.
Okay.
But the concern is the pressures for taxes increase. You're on a fixed income, and you have possibly developers coming to your house saying, oh, I could probably make 3 units out of your home. How do we protect those units, which gets to displacement?
Which is my point. If you know, and I'm sorry, we talked about this last week about having your prejudices. We own our home free and clear. We could probably sell it for a pretty penny, but could buy nothing to live in elsewhere comparable to it, that we couldn't pay rent that would be less than what we pay now for tax, which is basically taxes. I mean, living expenses not included. So, you know, I just don't like to, I don't want to, I'm not in a neighborhood where this is going to happen, I don't believe. But I understand if I live downtown in your neighborhood, and I had been there all my life, and that's, you know, you own it, you don't pay rent, you pay taxes and utilities, and now somebody wants to shove you out into an apartment that you're going to have to pay, even if it's $1,200 a month, it's $1,200 a month more than I have to pay where I live. And you're, in some shape, you're being forced to do it. Nobody's twisting your arm, except somebody's coming in and saying, okay, if you don't sell, I'm gonna build a high rise on this side of you and a high rise on this side of you, and then how you gonna feel? You're gonna feel really angry. So I'm hoping that what you're doing and what your research is doing is addressing that problem, or is it a problem? Again, my age group is, it could happen to me. Where I live, I don't think so. But I'm sure there are people that live in a house, don't pay rent, don't pay house payment, and can't afford to let it go so they can go somewhere else to rent an apartment. So, does that clear about my position?
Yeah, no, I understand that now. So, yeah, I just didn't understand what you were referring to before, so thank you.
Okay.
Yep. And it is our intent to be addressing all sorts of displacement impacts, and that would be one example of displacement impact. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, for me, one of the challenges is, I would love to find a house that has a bedroom on the first floor. My wife and I can go up and down the stairs just fine right now, but in 20 years, that may not be the case. And so so I understand what you mean now by feeling like you have to sell property even though you own it free and clear. And, our preference would be to stay here in this community. And if I can't find a place with a bedroom on the entry floor, that makes it challenging. So the same thing with the affordability. So I understand what you're saying, so thank you. All right.
Just to make sure there weren't any questions in the virtual world.
No, I didn't see any hands go up.
Nope.
Kirk, I hope that you don't
Oh.
feel that there's any heat on you. I just wanted to understand better, so thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Jake, I can't see the hands right now because I've got other screens open. Go ahead, Councilmember.
No worries at all. Kate, thank you for the presentation. Did we ever get kind of a final word on the per capita disparity, how low that is compared to the median? Did we end up discovering or confirming that the per capita incorporates the income at the prison, from the prison population as well?
That is a fantastic question that Deborah and I were discussing earlier today, and I do need to get back to the consultants. I think I've mentioned, I can't remember if at the council, but the planning commission, the challenge for Monroe is if we could only use the household data, the prison or the Department of Corrections population is automatically removed. But if you're looking at total population, which I believe the per capita includes, could potentially include the Department of Corrections population unless it was intentionally removed. So I need to get back to the consultants to understand how they came up with that number.
Got it. Thank you so much. I was looking at the numbers compared to Snohomish County. That number is dramatically low. So yeah, I would love to find that out to confirm, because if that isn't the case, then I would love to dig into that figure further. But yeah, thank you very much.
Yep.
Anything further? Okay. Yeah, we'll be back. All right. I'm sorry. I was just thinking about how population is allocated and everything, and growth, and how we're limited in our ability to grow, and yet they want us to do higher density. But the PSRC and the county end up doing things that make it harder for us to realize affordable housing. And I find that really frustrating. I find it frustrating that the county continues to allow smaller lot development in our urban growth area. King County, the urban growth areas outside cities before they get annexed are at 5 or 10 acre parcels. The nice thing about doing that is that when a city is ready to annex territory, they annex territory, and then they can have higher density on it, which allows the cities to accommodate a more diverse housing stock, which allows for hopefully more missing middle and at least more choices for people with different needs, just like Councilmember Scarborough was bringing up. So anyway, I'm just thinking about how we have a broken system, and that one of the reasons why, when you are attending Snohomish County tomorrow, Councilmember, that I hope you're there discouraging them from having sprawling growth in the Malpe area, when that growth should be coming to cities like Monroe and Snohomish, where we have actual city services like a police department and planning department and other things that those areas we're paying for the sheriff and others to provide city level services in what should be rural areas. Anyway, I'll hop off my soapbox. Anybody else have anything to say? All right, thank you all very much this evening. Have a great rest of your week. We do not have a need for an executive session, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.